And let's begin. And thanks for joining me today. Appreciate you being here and carving the time out of, I'm sure, what's a busy day. I know it's a very busy time of year, and we're going to be talking about just a little bit of a disclaimer, a little bit of just sort of a warning to say we're going to be talking about, not directly about world events, but hopefully give you some ways to be using your mindfulness practice to cope with just the onslaught of just the horrors that are out there, that the very difficult times that many in the world are going through. So I hope that doesn't kind of trigger any reactions for anybody, but just to kind of give you that heads up. We are going to do a couple practices around that. I'm hoping to show you a couple of things that will help, and that's really the point of it. And then we're going to finish with a little bit of gratitude, counting your blessings, since Thanksgiving is right around the corner. So the first practice we'll get right into, as you often do, is just a quick, we've done this before, but I just thought this would be a quick grounding practice. So just using your hand, kind of putting a hand up in front of you. And then what we're going to do is just trace. You can start from either side. It doesn't really matter, but starting from, let's see, I'll start from my pinky side. And as we move up, tracing our hand with the other hand, we're going to breathe in. And coming down, breathe out. Kind of longer breaths than normal. In and out. Paying attention to the breathing, in and out, but also to the tactile sense of feeling yourself tracing the hand in and out, or to the other side, all the way to the thumb. And then we'll go back and we'll go back the same way, in, out, in, out. Now thoughts may pop up as you're doing this. In. When they do, just come back to the feeling of your fingertips and your breathing. In and out. And that's just a quick practice using the hand that you could do anytime. And just one example of grounding ourselves and sort of an intro into thinking about, with all that is going on, and when you turn the news on or you pick up your phone and you get notifications about some of the very upsetting things, there are quick practices that we can do to just center us and ground us, and that's one of them. And as I bring up the quotes, I always like to include a couple of quotes. I know you've seen this before if you've been in my classes. I use both these quotes. We are not troubled by things, but by the opinions we have about things. That's from Epictetus. But I was thinking about this one and realizing that, with all that's going on in the world around us, we are really troubled by these things. It's not just what we're telling ourselves that makes it worse. And in some ways, this quote is sort of about being careful not to make a mountain out of a molehill. But these things that are happening are already mountains. We don't have to elaborate on them. They're already very troubling and upsetting, right? So what do we do with that? The second quote is by Viktor Frankl: between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So it occurred to me also with this one that it's not so easy to do, especially when we turn on the news or when we want to be informed about what's going on. It makes it that much harder to mindfully do whatever it is, use any of our mindful techniques, whether it's breathing or feeling the body, relaxing ourselves. I mean, there's so many mindful practices that we've gone over. The stimulus is so strong that it's sometimes very hard to find that space between stimulus and response. So that's really what I wanted to try to give you, is a couple of practices that you could do, and talk a little bit about how we can try to take control of the flow of information and the intensity of information that we get about all these things. All right, so before we get into that, let's just kind of say welcome and good to see everybody. Glad you can join me today for our November refresher webinar. And again, I'm recording this, as you probably know. I'll post it. I'll send out the slides to you later. And I just want to check in and ask you, how is it going? How's it going with your practice, formally and informally? But just how is it going? I mean, we have been dealing with an awful lot of upsetting news with what's going on in the Israel Gaza conflict, not to mention all the other things that are going on. That's sort of the headlines. And there's a lot of very huge and upsetting things going on in our world. So you can either feel free to put into the chat if you'd like to. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. You can unmute yourself if you wanted to make a comment, but I did want to just do a check-in and ask, how are you doing? And especially, how are you doing? Sometimes when these kinds of events are going on in our world, it's hard to keep up our regular practices. And actually, these are the times when we need to keep them up, because these can be the practices that can keep us with a sense of groundedness and equanimity. And I'll mention equanimity as a quality that we try to cultivate later on as we go into the practice. All right, so here's one good comment. I stopped watching the news for a period of time. It was difficult to hear and watch all the negative that the news provides. So true. So yeah, we can turn the channel off. We can watch something else. We can divert our attention, which is hard to do. And I'm going to talk about that. It's very hard to do because we want to stay informed, but we have to be careful about how much comes into our consciousness and affects our well-being and our emotional state. I honestly try not to watch the news too often, and that helps. Even social media. Right. That's a good point, because it's not just the news. I have a few notifications and news feeds on my phone, and so you get these things, and they disrupt your normal flow, right? They're really kind of upsetting, and we don't have to read those either. We don't have to follow that ping and go down that rabbit hole, but it's kind of hard not to. So that's part of, to be mindfully aware of. You have a choice. You have a choice to watch that or read about it or not. You have a choice to do certain things in the moment. Going okay, having a hard time with the time change. Yeah, that's a good point too. It's affected us. Changing the time is definitely makes things a little more difficult. I think it's interfering with my practice, my brain. I will need to get back on track. Yeah, that's a good observation. And it does affect our sleep a little bit. It affects probably our regular daily schedule and when we normally do our practices. So glad you pointed that out, Therese. I've been taking more and more pauses in my day to center and calm myself. Good. That's really, really good and important. I'm connecting with friends more. Excellent. Also really good. I still find value in having my buddy for support. In movement meditation, I do movement, something blocking that, but movement meditation every morning. And that's another good point. Vary it up, do different times and different kinds of meditations. I choose how much media coverage. That's such a key word, choosing it. So that's really a good segue, Roberta, into what we're going to be talking about today. All great comments. I appreciate those. Thank you for sharing. We're going to talk about a couple of quick practices. We did the hand practice already, showed you the quotes for the month. I'm going to talk about some strategies when news is overwhelming. I'm going to share a couple of other quick practices. We'll do a resilience meditation that I came across that I think applies to how we cope with and how we respond to all of these things that are going on. And then also did want to include some, towards the end, some information, and if we have time, a quick gratitude practice. So the first thing that we go to, though, is talking about the negativity bias. So not only do we have the waves of difficult situations that are going on in the world around us, but we already have the negativity bias that's kind of hardwired into us. And we do have this tendency to put more weight on negative events compared to positive ones. So we've talked about this a number of times. It's important to focus and savor positive events. It's important to let them sink in. That can help us override the negativity bias. And I'm going to give you a couple of things at the end that you can try. We remember, react, think, and make decisions more strongly to negative experiences and stimuli compared to the positive ones. So not only, it's kind of a perfect storm in a way that we have all that's going on in the world, and you may be touched in ways more directly by what's going on than others, or you may just have more sensitivities to it. And even if you don't, we are still going to more strongly react to it because of the negativity bias. And as I said before, it's negative enough as it is. So it does sort of make sort of a compound and adds on to our reaction. The negativity bias comes from our evolutionary adaptation to survival. Being able to focus on risks and threats, those helped us to survive. And that's what it's all about. And that's why we are more prone to focusing on things in the environment that are a threat or a risk. That last point, although the human brain has evolved, this part of the brain still exists and a major impact on how we think, respond, and feel. And the problem is though we may not be worried about saber-toothed tigers anymore, we still get the news, we still get stressful triggers, we still get many things throughout each and every day that they bring on the fight or flight response. And so the negativity bias kind of triggers us, and the fight or flight response also adds to that. So it really is kind of an uphill battle. So all the reason why we need to practice some of these things more regularly, more devoutly, it's maybe a religious word, but using it in a way that's, developing our practice is so important. We're approaching the holidays that can also bring us a lot more stress in our lives. And so the gratitude that we're going to share at the end, that'll be helpful to as we go into these difficult times. So I came across this. This is 3 strategies for when the news is overwhelming. I came across this from the 10% Happier podcast, and you might want to check this out. It's really excellent. It's about, I think, 50 minutes, 45, 50 minutes podcast. And on the next slide, you'll see the reference to that in the source, so you can follow that if you wanted to. Anyway, the first strategy is to mindfully consume your media intake. And a number of you mentioned this, but keeping in mind that we not only have the Israeli-Gaza conflict, there's still a war in Ukraine going on. There's plenty of other geopolitical problems going on in the world. We just had another mass shooting in Maine. Sure, you're aware of that. Those are all very sad and depressing. And then there's climate change and the political environment and all of that. I mean, I can go on and on. So it is kind of like an avalanche of things that we're exposed to in the media. So it is easy to get sucked into the vortex of news, and we want to be informed, but you can easily find yourself what they call doom scrolling and reacting to and searching for more information. And this next part, it's natural and human to feel a deep care for people that are involved directly in these crises. And you want to do something, you want to be responsive, but here's part of the message is we need to be patient with that. We need to mindfully first be careful about what we take in and regulate, as some of you mentioned that you do already, so I'm glad to hear that. Be careful to know when to draw the line, and this is an individual decision. You have to draw the line yourself, and it's difficult to do that, but our mindfulness practice can really help us be aware to notice when we're feeling a bit overwhelmed by that particular news show or story, or sometimes the images can be graphic and very saddening. So that may be the time to draw the boundary. And the second point is it's so important to take extra care and attention on ourselves and our own mindfulness practice, to do more pauses, like Roberta mentioned, more breath practices, more ways to relax, basically calming down our nervous system as best we can. Paying attention to our sleep hygiene, to eating well, to resting and getting fun. And I mean, you might even feel guilty doing some of those things. So mindfully being aware of that is important. But it is important to give ourselves extra doses of those kinds of practices to counteract the negativity that's going on. And that last point, to take care of our feelings, to make space for our feelings. Sometimes it brings up such intense feelings that all we want to do is push it away, right? Or ignore them or get rid of them. And so we may have a tendency to do things to try to numb ourselves and to not pay attention to the feelings. But simple message is to acknowledge those feelings. You might label them, you might talk to somebody about them, you might share with a buddy some of those things that you're feeling, but don't totally stuff it, don't totally ignore it. At least acknowledge it and label it, and then maybe do a mindful practice to do that. In the podcast, it's a very interesting total story. So again, you may want to watch it. They talk about Thich Nhat Hanh, and if you don't know, he recently died, but he was a Buddhist monk from Vietnam, and he was in Vietnam at the very beginnings of the Vietnam War, even before America got involved, and he became an activist. And he would take day-long retreats, mindfulness retreats, even while he was doing things to protest and doing things to counteract in his own world in Vietnam. And people would say to him, what is the use of stepping back and doing retreats and doing these mindfulness practices? We need to take action. We need to do things to get our point across. And his response was, no, we need to take care of ourselves first. We need to do things to recover and heal and work from the inside. Even in the middle of a war zone, we need to take care of ourselves so that we move from a place of groundedness instead of from fear and anxiety. So I think that's really important. So those practices are important to do and to keep doing. The last step is to engage wisely. And so this is where we can, after doing the first couple of steps, take some concrete action, whether locally or nationally. But I think this point here that they talk about, I think is so important, to keep alive moments of energy, joy, beauty, and connection, care, and deep peace in ourselves. So that, in other words, in our present moment, we're attending to those things so we don't get overwhelmed by grief and sorrow and fear and anxiety, because our present state leads us into our future. So in other words, if we get totally wrapped up into the negativity of it, if we focus on all those things that are going wrong, that will become our future. We can more or less control where we're going into the future with how we're responding to it in the present. So this quote by Thich Nhat Hanh, you don't have to do everything, just do what you can in your own little corner of the planet. So important. We can take care of ourselves. We take action in whatever ways that we can, where we can. And this next and last quote by Kyra Juolingo, and she's the one that they really reference, and you'll see the source there. They're 3 Buddhist strategies for when the news is overwhelming. And again, I encourage you, if you really want to hear more about this, to check that out on the 10% Happier podcast. You don't need the app for this. You can go right to the podcast and listen to it. It's not the most recent. It's probably the second most recent one. If you're searching for it, just go back an episode or 2 and you'll find it. But her quote, if we don't take care of ourselves, we're going to be a mess when we're really needed, when it really counts. So taking care of ourselves now is going to really help us, again, in the future, to be able to respond and engage and take action wisely and mindfully. So that's a lot to think about. And I came across this next slide, and this is a practice that we can do together. But this next slide, this is a brief practice. This is actually from another podcast, the Being Well podcast with Dr. Rick Hansen and Forrest Hansen. And I actually found this after when the war in Ukraine first broke out. And so do this along with me now. So we first take a pause. It's kind of like the 3-minute breathing space, if you remember that. Just take a pause and check in with yourself and ask yourself, how am I? How am I right now? Noticing thoughts, feelings, and what's going on in the body. So just mindfully checking in with those 3 areas. And then we'll do 3 long, deep, mindful breaths. So breathe in and feel the breath. This helps us to slow down, let the breath calm you down. And then breathe in again, and breathe in for you, whatever you need in the moment, paying attention to what you need, what care, compassion, and support would be helpful to nurture yourself. And then the last breath or set of breaths is breathe out for others. All those that you're worried about, all those who are affected by these crises and are troubled, breathe out for them. And then finally, to acknowledge your feelings. And this helps to do this with some breath practice, because we may not be as reactive. So once you calm yourself down mindfully, paying attention to the breath and the body. Feel your feelings, acknowledge and label them like we discussed. That's the time to do that. And then you could, before we close the practice, then just expand your awareness, feel yourself breathing again, pay attention to the breath, feel the whole body breathing in sort of an expansive way, and then move forward to the next activities. So that's a quick practice that you can try. And then he points out, then you can begin to educate yourself more from trusted sources and in limited doses. You can resource yourself. This helps us ask ourselves, what do we need in order to take action? What do we need to do for ourselves and that our own little corner of the world? And I put in strong back and soft front. That's a practice that we've done before. And I like that sort of metaphor of feeling that we have a strong spine, a strong back to support us, to give us strength and resilience, and a soft front to give us compassion, to keep ourselves open and receptive to being able to feel and be compassionate and caring towards those who may be, to ourselves and those who may be also directly affected by these. Then you can come up with a plan for yourself and others. What's one thing that you can do? And then the action step is put your plan into place. So we do tend to want to jump right to action steps, especially when we feel so troubled by what's going on. But as you can see, there's a number of things we can do first to kind of get ourselves ready to do that. Another thing you can try is, as a quick practice, we've done this before a couple of episodes ago in the refreshers, we talked about getting in touch with the senses. And just a reminder, this is a quick practice. 5 things you can see. Just take time to search around visually. 5 things that you can see and pay attention to. 4 things you can hear. Try to listen to 4 different things in your environment. 3 things you can touch. You can mix these up. 2 things you can smell. 1 thing you can taste. A great way to ground yourself. So another reminder and a quick practice. Which brings us to this resilience meditation. This is based on the work of Sebene Selassie, another meditation instructor from 10% Happier from the app. So let's do this meditation now. So this is about resilience, obviously. And I think most of us are pretty resilient given what we've been through in the last few years. It's helped us develop our resilience, but that's kind of the key point, that we can cultivate resilience. We can strengthen ourselves by doing these kinds of practices. We can help ourselves be able to bounce back when we are affected by things in our own lives, but also in the things that are going on in the world around us. And it involves 3 things. It involves developing a positive attitude. It involves resolve, sort of a determination, and it involves equanimity. So let's begin the actual practice. So find a posture that's comfortable, one that gives you a sense of balance. You might sense into that feeling of strong back, soft front. Let the spine be not rigid, but let the spine be strong, flexible, supporting you. Let the front of the body be soft, softening the belly, softening the chest area. You might also soften the shoulders and the jaw and the face, releasing tension. You can close your eyes, or if you'd prefer, you can keep your gaze unfocused and soft down in front of you. And let the body settle. See if you can let the body sink into the chair. See if you can let the mind settle as we pay attention to the body and also to the breath. As we gather our awareness, let's take a couple of nice deep breaths in and out to help us settle and relax. The breath can be our primary anchor that we return to. So whenever we get upset or we get distracted in the meditation, we come back to the anchor of the breath. Or you can also come back to the body itself being anchored and grounded in the chair. That's another way we can be anchored. And we gather our attention being with whatever is happening, trying to meet it in a non-judgmental way, trying to meet it with acceptance. And the first step that we take is developing and bringing a positive attitude to our practice. So that means noticing when we do critique or judge our own selves, or even the meditation that we're doing, when we say things to ourselves that are really not helpful, noticing that, maybe coming back to the anchor, stabilizing our attention. And we appreciate whatever is happening, no matter what is happening in the mind and the body, doing our best to meet it with acceptance, allowing things to happen and go on happening. We might be aware of how we react to that. You might be aware of getting pulled into a string of thoughts, worry thoughts, or negative thoughts, or emotions. That's okay. Whenever that happens, it's going to happen. Just noticing that, and then gently refocusing on our anchor of the breath or the body. And see if you can bring even a little enthusiasm to whatever is happening. Sort of that positive can-do attitude. Might even say to yourself that you can handle this, that you have handled similar experiences. Challenging experiences are also welcome. They help build a resilience. And so we're kind of saying yes to whatever is here. Those thoughts, emotions, sensations, we welcome them. And if they're challenging, trying to, with a little bit of friendliness and care for ourselves, saying, yes, this too is welcome. So then we turn to our resolve or determination and our capacity for it. It's a key aspect of resilience. Sort of an understanding of the task at hand that helps guide our practice. And knowing that life can be distracting and discouraging and even feeling sometimes distraught, we can cultivate a resolve that allows us to recognize what is happening in any moment and start over by returning to our intention to be present, to not get carried away, but our intention to be here with the breath and the body. So we return to the body and the breath every time we get distracted, every time we get pulled away, every time our attention is hijacked. And remembering to relax when tension comes back into the body. Relax, soft front, soft shoulders, maybe even smiling to ourselves a little bit. And then exploring equanimity, the capacity to allow whatever is happening It is built into our practice from the start. So you can say to yourself, allow. We're just allowing things to be. And like Martin Luther King Jr. said, peace is not the destination. Peace is the way. So equanimity is not the destination. Equanimity is the way. Equanimity is seeing what is happening without getting caught up with what we see. No need to get lost in whatever is going on or upset that we've lost our way. Equanimity includes starting over in this moment. And again, in this one. Can you make space for exactly what is here? Saying yes, starting over, and allowing. So just continuing to breathe, coming back to the anchor, feeling the body in the chair. And we'll finish the meditation, opening the eyes if they've been closed, reconnecting with our surroundings, checking in with ourselves. And it's helpful to remember that resilience is a natural ability and that we can all develop it. We can cultivate this positive attitude, this sense of resolve and equanimity. These are ways to grow our resilience and see if we can bring these qualities into our daily life. So just curious what that was like. Feel free to give me your reactions and thoughts about that meditation while I put up the slide about equanimity. This kind of defines it. We've covered this in another workshop. But I think this whole sense of resilience and equanimity and resolve and our attitude, paying attention to them is so important, especially when we're dealing with all that's so upsetting in the world around us. So equanimity, as you can see, definition, it's mental calmness, it's composure. So it's what we were talking about before, trying to cultivate that. And the more we practice that, the more that we can tap into that. That's that sense of being able to, even when things get really tough, when we cultivate this sense of resilience and equanimity, we'll be able to call upon that when most needed. All right, so let me know if you do have any reactions to that. We have about 5 minutes left. I want to take the last 5 minutes, kind of shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about gratitude and turning our attention to things that are positive are a great way to counteract that negativity bias. So just putting up here just some gratitude prompts. So take a look at these and maybe pick one or two out, do a really quick practice before we finish. But so just maybe what are a couple of things that you want to focus on, even simple little things, something that makes you laugh, your favorite music or song, something you take for granted. So just as you scan through this, what comes to mind, what comes into the heart. And then this is just a quote that I've used before. It's not happiness that makes us grateful, it's gratefulness that makes us happy. So these are things that, or this is a quote that reminds us that when we practice gratitude and this sort of a way of focusing on what's going well, that's what helps us bring us to happiness and well-being. In fact, gratitude is one of the most, in the studies, one of the most effective ways to get a sense of happiness and well-being. When I send the slides out, you may want to watch. These are brief little videos, but really good videos on gratitude. And so check those out. And then remind you, we've talked about the 3 good things practice. This is another kind of quick practice that you can do at the end of the day. Basically, what all you're doing is bringing to mind, and it helps to write it down or send a text to somebody or an email or share it with somebody. 3 things that went well for you today. So you can do this at the end of the workday or in the evening or before you go to bed. It does seem to make a difference to write them down, to have a physical record of it. So either typing it in somewhere or writing it down is important. And of course, that helps turn our attention to, instead of the things that didn't go so well, the things that did go well. Some quick gratitude pauses. So just quick things that you can remember to do as part of your daily practice. I'm not going to go through all these. You can read them, but again, I'll send the slides out because what I'd like to do before we finish is a very quick gratitude practice as we look at this. So let's take a minute or two to close the eyes. We'll keep them slightly open if you'd prefer. Tune into the body and breathe nice and easily. Gather our awareness through the breath and think of a person who has supported you. Family member, perhaps, or a colleague at work, maybe a teacher or a mentor, good friend. Just think of this person that you're grateful for, who's helped you out, supported you. And then think of something in your life that you're grateful for. It could be just one thing. It could be a simple thing, or it could be something like your home, something that gives you warmth and comfort. And just take a moment to appreciate it. Notice it where you feel this in the body, perhaps. And then finally, what's a quality of yours that you can be grateful for? Again, it doesn't have to be anything huge. It could be something small that you did for someone recently. Try to bring a quality, a way that you are that supported someone else, quality of yours that helps other people get through the day, whether it's somebody you know or even a stranger. And when you do that, how it made you feel and where you feel it in the body. And just take a moment to savor these quick gratitude thoughts and reflections. Let them kind of sink in a little bit before we move on to the rest of our busy day. And maybe make an intention to bring some gratitude into the different activities of the day, to remember to take these pauses to notice and savor the blessings of our life. And so if your eyes have been closed, feel free to open them. And we'll finish today's session with this quote here: gratitude teaches us to appreciate the rainbow and the storm. So when I send the slides out, I'll also have the reminder about our phone meditations and the app and resources and the EFR program. And so thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you doing this with me. I couldn't do it without you. I'm very, very grateful to have you on my journey. And I want to wish you all the best for Thanksgiving. And we'll do this again. Our next mindfulness refresher will be the second Wednesday in December, whenever that is. You can join me then. But have a warm and wonderful Thanksgiving, and take good care. Try some of these practices. And thanks so much for all the thanks that I see coming through the comments there. Really, really appreciate those. Appreciate you.